These are the sleepers you should be targeting at the end of your fantasy drafts. Welcome, football fans and fantasy freaks. It's Mitch here with my sleepers for 2025. We're going position by position with over 20 of my favorite fantasy football sleepers. These are players that you can draft at the end of your draft. Quarterbacks, tight ends, if you want to wait on that position, wide receivers, and running backs that could ultimately be some of the biggest values and potentially even league winners in 2025. Let's kick it off with the running back position, where quite frequently the winners of your fantasy leagues, they pick up or they draft a big time sleeper that no one sees coming. So I'm going to prepare you before your draft even begins, before the league even starts, so you know these players. The first name is more of a value than he is a true nobody, right? Like, everybody kind of knows Ramondre Stevenson. He's been very fantasy relevant for most of his career. But in 2025, this might be the cheapest you've been able to draft Stevenson since his rookie season. And very much like his rookie season, it's due to the fact that there's competition in the backfield. Everybody's in love with Travion Henderson. But I would not discount the role that the vet Ramondre Stevenson will play in New England in 2025. And this is why I still find myself drafting Stevenson, even if I like Henderson. Because he's going too late for a player that has independent value, that I believe can be a flex play throughout the season, that can be maybe even a lower end RB2 at his best. And who knows, if Henderson does get injured, Stevenson could really become a workhorse. We've seen him play that role in New England before. Josh McDaniels has a history of using multiple running backs. He typically likes a bigger back with size and power to man the early downs. And then he typically likes a quick, shifty, pass-catching specialist to play on third down. We have seen McDaniels maybe shift in perspective in recent years, specifically in Las Vegas with a stud running back named Josh Jacobs. That was the season Josh Jacobs led the NFL in rushing. So he has deviated from that approach really since leaving New England. But whenever he was in New England, it was Corey Dillon and Lawrence Maroney. Who remembers that? It was Kevin Falk and Maroney, or Kevin Falk and Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, or Danny Woodhead and Shane Vereen and Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, or LeGarrette Blount and James White, probably most famously, or Dion Lewis and James White and LeGarrette Blount. So there was a variety of different options, even Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, James White. So a lot of variety here. But typically you see the approach, 2-3 running backs getting touches, getting carries, no matter how talented. Now, I don't know if New England has had a running back talent quite like Travion Henderson, but Stevenson is a talented player. At his best, he has been a top 15 running back in football, capable of catching near 70 passes in a season and 1,000 yards on the ground. We've seen that from Stevenson in his career. He's got a good overall makeup of size, explosiveness, and pass catching. And that makes him very viable on early downs. This offensive line definitely looks a lot better in the run game this preseason. Will Campbell is an absolute monster in that regard. Mike Onwenu's been one of the best run blocking guards since entering the NFL. I do think that's probably the strength right now of Jared Wilson, the young rookie's game at left guard. Garrett Bradbury, better run blocker than pass blocker. And same thing probably can be said about Morgan Moses. So the Patriots have a really good run blocking line. And I do think they're going to use 1, 2, 3 running backs in this system. They also have Antonio Gibson. But I expect Stevenson, especially early in the season, to see many early down touches and potentially also red zone work because he is the biggest back with the best ability to run in between the tackles. So as much as we like Henderson for his pass catching appeal, and I truly expect him to be third down specialist, change of pace, but Henderson was not even a true bell cow at Ohio State, right? He had other players to work off of. Stevenson will be that guy, right? He'll be the Judkins of Ohio State in New England. So I think Stevenson is just going too late. He's not necessarily a sleeper, but he's certainly a value that could end up like an RB3 this season and be effective for your fantasy lineups. Tank Bigsby could be a different story here, but maybe a similar approach. So Tank Bigsby, he goes in a similar range to Stevenson, and he's also in a bit of a committee in Jacksonville. And the thing with Jacksonville is they have a new offensive coach, and people aren't exactly sure who is going to be the lead bell cow back. I don't expect it to really be anyone, whether it be Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, or even Tootin the rookie. But I will say this, out of the three, the best pure runner is Tank Bigsby. There were only 2 running backs who had 150 carries and gained more than 70% of their yardage after contact last season. One is our favorite running back to draft, Kenneth Walker, and the other is Tank Bigsby. He's a home run hitter. He's got really good speed, solid size, and out of these 3 backs, he's the most effective on early downs and in between the tackles. And we even saw some subtleties in the preseason for him to be used kind of like Bucky Irving in Tampa with the screen game because he is explosive there. He's not a natural receiver running routes. I think ETN is better in that regard. But in screen game, if he could just get a little bit more of that, plus the runs that he could get 10 carries a game, then we're talking about potentially an RB2 type finish here with some upside as well, contingent to the other guys playing or not or being injured. ETN has some injury history as well. So Bigsby is definitely an explosive option and potentially a rising offense in Jacksonville for a very good coordinator in Liam Cohen. So an interesting one to look at here. Next, we have Woody Marks, who is my most drafted. And I also want to throw in Dameon Pierce. I just wanted to make one graphic. I'm not going to make 2 graphics for the same team in the same backfield. Sorry, guys. But Woody Marks is my most drafted sleeper because he's very affordable, even on Underdog, because people don't know what to make of Woody Marks, despite being acquired in the draft at a 4th round draft price, despite being actually a very effective receiver in his college career, showcasing really appealing pass blocking reps in the preseason, which is a huge thing for rookie running backs to get on the field. Despite the Joe Mixon injury, people are just unsure. Is it Nick Chubb? Is it going to be Dameon Pierce? Is it going to be Woody Marks? And to me, I'm just willing to bank on 1, the unknown of Woody Marks, and then 2, the youthful guy, right? Like Nick Chubb is kind of washed. He's kind of old. If he does get the lead carries early in the year, I don't expect it to last long because I don't think they'll be efficient enough. So I think the Texans will give that role to Chubb out of respect. But I think that it could easily turn by week 2, week 3, week 4, like not very long until Woody Marks or Dameon Pierce become the lead ball carrier. And the interesting thing about Marks is he'll be able to make his mark on 3rd downs because he is a good pass blocker and he is an effective screen guy, an effective pass catcher. CJ Stroud's going to want that guy on the field more often than not. And CJ Stroud over the years has had kind of a pretty big part in drafting some of these players. He actually has influence over the offensive personnel here that they do draft. So I do wonder if he had a hand in the selection of Woody Marks, but he is a guy that I saw some good things from in terms of vision, patience, his cutting ability, and even his power in between the tackles in the preseason. When you flip the script to Dameon Pierce, we have seen Pierce be a good football player in the NFL, and he's still relatively young, right? He had 939 yards, I believe, in his rookie season in 2022, which wasn't all that long ago. That's 85 yards from scrimmage per game, Dameon Pierce, as a rookie. They tilt their run scheme back towards more of a man power blocking scheme as opposed to a zone blocking scheme, which is where Pierce was most effective. It's Nick Caley, who comes from the Rams and the Patriots. They run that more so, People think of McVay as the zone scheme guy, but they have become a lot more of a powerful run scheme, counters and pulling linemen and duo and all that sort of stuff. And I think Pierce is much more effective in that role or in that offense. We've also seen Pierce be a home run hitter who really does have fierce style of play where he just runs you over. So I could see Pierce being the early down guy potentially, Mark making his mark on third downs, and maybe even one of these guys becoming the feature back if Nick Chubb falters early, which is fairly likely, in my opinion. Plus, you got to throw in the fact that Joe Mixon might just be done for the year. Like, he might not play at all. So you have to take that into account with a late round flyer here. Braylon Allen is going to be my next mention. He goes higher than these guys, but Braylon Allen is a little bit more obvious. He is at least going to be the 1B in New York to Breece Hall. And this is why I don't like Breece Hall in drafts, because I do think Allen is going to play a major role, specifically in between the tackles on early downs and potentially in short yardage. Braylon Allen is rare. He is physically a big running back. He's about like 6'2", 6'3", and apparently, reports coming out of New York, I don't know personally, but apparently there are quotes suggesting that Breece Hall wasn't the best running back in Jets training camp, and the best running back was Braylon Allen, okay? He's very young. I think he's only like 21 years old. He was 20 as a rookie, which is ludicrous, right? The Jets might run the ball more than any team in the NFL because they have Justin Fields at quarterback, and they have next to no receivers outside of Garrett Wilson. So a 1A, 1B split in a run-heavy approach, goal line touches, probably a few catches, and you're getting him really late in an offense where he could ultimately be the starter if he just strictly outplays Breece Hall, a guy that the new regime in New York, they like Braylon Allen, right? Their coach likes Braylon Allen, the way that they talk about him in New York. And then also, they don't want to pay Breece Hall. So by the end of the year, Allen could very easily be the starter simply because they want him to be the starter for the future, right? Unless they want to choose to run Breece Hall into the ground, but that's kind of up to them, I guess. Then we have Kyle Monangai, who is a 7th round pick by the Bears. Monangai is interesting because he has clearly shifted and made his way throughout training camp and the preseason as the number 2 back in Chicago. And if you know me, you know that I'm not the biggest DeAndre Swift guy, specifically as a runner. I think he is flawed. His vision is very faulty. And when you have an offensive-minded coach like Ben Johnson, who's very detailed and particular, if Swift is showcasing signs of not hitting the right hole or not, going where the play is designed on running downs, which Ben Johnson's had DeAndre Swift before, so he probably has pretty fair evaluation of him in his mind in terms of what he can bring to the offense. Pass catching, screens, explosiveness, change of pace, but not necessarily a guy that can run the ball and get the dirty yards. And what you like about Monangai, he might not be as electric. He might not be hurdling people in the open field like DeAndre Swift, but he has very good vision and he has pretty effective feet and he has a low center of gravity with power. And who does that remind you of? Smaller running back, quick feet, not fast, but powerful and good vision. David Montgomery, does it not? Right? So this could be a guy where he could be taking the most touches on the ground by midseason. And he has already outplayed Roschon Johnson, who's been dealing with injuries throughout camp, running as the RB2 in practice. So they drafted him for a reason. They clearly liked him, and other people evaluated him above a round 7 player. So I think he could just be a steal where maybe you're getting a David Montgomery in Ben Johnson's new offense. I mean, I don't see why the Bears would force feed DeAndre Swift when he is not exactly Saquon Barkley. So, yeah. Next, Ollie Gordon from the Miami Dolphins is really interesting the closer we get to the season. So I think he could be the starting running back for the Miami Dolphins in week 1 of your season. So he is well worth the pick and probably worth a bit of a reach if you so choose. Now, we don't really know what's going on with Devon Achane, but I will say that Gordon, if he gets the opportunity and he plays well, he could work his way into the touches even when A-Shane comes back. I think he's already replaced Jalen Wright, who is injured, as the RB2 in Miami. Gordon was the second best running back in college football in 2023, and people kind of forgot about that or are unaware, right? He had 1,700 yards and 21 touchdowns in that season in college. He has dominated in his preseason reps. He likely will have a goal line role. Even Tyreek Hill said that A-Shane can't score touchdowns or get short yardage. So Gordon is bigger, more physical. He could certainly play that role throughout the season. He does have legitimate 3-down ability. And, this is like a backfield that is injured. So he could be the guy the whole year if A-Shane goes down. So yeah, a rookie that had a poor season in 2024, had a great season in 2023, because of that was underdrafted, and now has a big-time opportunity to shine, and so far in the preseason, he's looked closer to 2023 than 2024. So I think certainly a steal, and maybe even the possibility of a league winner here. Jaden Blue is potentially the next Rico Dowdle in Dallas. Jaden Blue is somebody I've liked dating back to college. At Texas, I just felt like anytime he got the football, he was absolutely electrifying. He was creating highlights single-handedly. He's a very effective receiver and also a very fluid mover. I mean, from day one in the NFL, he is going to be one of the most explosive running backs to touch the football on a weekly basis. So Dallas did not spend high capital on him. There are flaws in his game. There is a bit of an injury history. There is a bit of maybe potentially some history of him not exactly being like the hardest worker. There were all reports and rumors about that at Texas in the draft process. I was trying to figure out why he didn't go higher in the draft and why Texas didn't use him more, because it just felt like every time I watched him, he was electric. And I think the problem with Dallas in the backfield is that they have nobody that could potentially be nearly as good or explosive or have the ceiling of this player. And being that they're going to be a very pass-heavy offense, they need the guy that's best at pass catching to be on the field more often than not. And it's Blue. I mean, he easily has the best vision, the best burst, and the best pass catching talent on the, depth chart and at the running back position. And again, they feel fine. They feel like a team that feels okay with starting a late round draft pick at running back. We just saw them move on from Tony Pollard for Rico Dowdle, a relative unknown, and go into the season with no worries, right? So yeah, they'll feature Javonte Williams early because he's experienced, but once they figure out Javonte Williams can't move and he can barely run, they're going to put Jaden Blue in there more often than not. So he might not be a feature back, he might not be a bell cow, but he feels like a guy that will get a lot of valuable touches in the offense. He'll be a change of pace, he'll be a pass catcher, and I think in an offense that's going to score and will have to score post Micah Parsons, I like this as a late round bet. You might have to be a bit patient with him, but eventually it could really pay off. Keaton Mitchell is our final running back sleeper here. Keaton Mitchell is a favorite of mine as a player. He's extremely explosive. As a rookie running back, I believe he was undrafted or a 7th round pick. I can't quite recall, but he went for 8.4 yards per carry as a rookie. And if the superhero Derrick Henry does get injured or go down at some point in a season, Keaton Mitchell instantly becomes the lead ball carrier and early down running back for the best running game in football attached to Lamar Jackson. And he's good at football. We saw it in the preseason. We saw it as a rookie. He's fully healed from his injury that took him out in year 2 and wasn't relevant in year 2. Plus, I think they want him to be more involved in the pass catching department as well and maybe take some reps away from Justice Hill. So, and even maybe he could split more carries than we think with an older Derrick Henry. It's entirely possible because he really is that good, right? And provide a speed threat to the power and size of Derrick Henry. So Keaton Mitchell is really intriguing because he's in a perfect situation if anything happens to Derrick Henry. Now let's transition to the quarterback position. The first name I want to mention is the old reliable Matthew Stafford. I think he's being slept on. Simply, I'm going to put it this way. I have no stats for you, but I'll put it this way. Matthew Stafford, a consensus top 10 NFL quarterback in real life attached to Sean McVay, has Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua at wide receiver. That's all I really need to say, right? Like, there's certainly going to be weeks where Matthew Stafford could throw 3 touchdowns and 300 yards. And especially in games where the Rams play better offenses, Stafford should be startable. I also think the Rams are more likely to throw the ball this year because I think last year they felt like they had to run the ball more out of necessity due to the receiver injuries, right? Due to Cooper Kupp being washed, all that sort of stuff. But now they have legitimate 2 number 1 receivers. They drafted a tight end who catches the ball. So there is reason to believe that Stafford could be closer to 2021 form than, statistically speaking, 40 touchdown upside exists in this offense. So I think Stafford, as long as he's playing, he wouldn't be a guy that I'd draft because he's kind of boring and nobody will draft him unless you're in a 2 QB league. If you're in a 2 QB league, he's a pretty good pick. But he's certainly a guy that I would think about every week and just see how he's playing throughout the season. So he certainly is a sleeper for me that could end up finishing as a QB1. He very well could. Next, Jordan Love. Jordan Love finished as a top 6 fantasy option in 2023. He was the QB5 in 2023. He threw, I think, 32 touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken, as essentially a rookie quarterback in Green Bay. Last year, he finished as QB17. He did miss 2 games, and he also played through a plethora of injuries last year. What I like about Jordan Love, he's attached to Matt LaFleur in an offense that likes to throw a lot of touchdowns. You saw that with Aaron Rodgers. You saw that with Jordan Love as a rookie. And he has a lot of weapons, right? And Jaden Reed is a bit banged up, and that might derail his season to a certain degree. But at some point, Christian Watson's going to return within the first 5 to 6 games. So I think Watson could take some of those reps away from Reed eventually. They have Matthew Golden, who's looked very promising. I've gone at length talking about Tucker Kraft and how good I think he is. They do have guys on the bench that can play like Wicks, for example. They still have Romeo Doubs, and they have one of the best running games and play action games in football. I think Jordan Love has 35 plus touchdown upside on a very good NFC team that's going to be contending, that's going to be scoring points. They're going to be a top 10 offense almost without a doubt. So Jordan Love, for a quarterback that is in a top 10 offense, feels genuinely underdrafted for a guy that did finish as a top 6 quarterback in fantasy a couple years ago. CJ Stroud is my final quarterback sleeper. He was QB9 as a rookie. He was being drafted, I think, as QB7 or 8 last year. And all of a sudden, he's being drafted near 20 this year. He led the NFL in yards per game as a rookie quarterback. This year, his offensive line honestly couldn't be worse. They have a new offensive line coach. They have a new offensive coordinator. And from what I've seen, they have an entirely new offensive line pretty much. Like, they have a new left tackle. They have a new center. They have a new right guard, a new left guard, and Titus Howard is playing right tackle. So they pretty much have an entirely new offensive line, an entirely new offensive coordinator, and they also have better receivers than last year. Like, a lot of people get that misconstrued because Tank Dell technically was on the team. Stephon Diggs technically was on the team. But Diggs played like 3 or 4 games, and then Tank was on and off in the lineup. And by the end of the year, wasn't there. So it was really Nico Collins, who also got injured at one point, and like a bunch of guys, right? Now they have Nico Collins, Christian Kirk, who's a good receiver, specifically in the slot, Jaden Higgins, who a lot of people like as a second-round receiver, Noel as well, and then all the other guys they had last year. So they have much better depth at that position. They have no Joe Mixon, which means they're going to throw the ball more, as I mentioned with Woody Marks. And yeah, like, we were drafting this guy who we all think is very talented, and he's very young, and it's very possible he bounces back from a down year last year after leading the NFL in yards per game in his rookie season and being a guy we were drafted as a top 10 quarterback last year. He could easily finish as a lower end quarterback 1 if things go right for him. So Stroud is definitely a sleeper this year. Now, the wide receiver position. I've talked a lot about Drake London, but there's another receiver in Atlanta that I like to draft, and his name is Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney last year went for 64 catches, 992 yards, and 5 touchdowns in Atlanta. He also has a separate season in Chicago where he had 81 catches, 1,055 yards, and That's a pretty good season. So he has 2 seasons of basically 1,000 yards. He's the clear number 2 receiver in Atlanta. He's the clear number 2 passing game option. Kyle Pitts isn't anywhere in his window. It's Drake London, it's Darnell Mooney. They don't have a good defense. They're in a division with a bunch of bad defenses. They play 8 games against mediocre to bad defenses. He nearly had 1,000 yards last year, and he has a quarterback upgrade in terms of deep ball ability. And Mooney can run. One of his strengths is his deep ball ability. He is a very good double move route runner. He's very fast. So Mooney could potentially be a phenomenal wide receiver 4 pick that ends up being a regular starter for you. Last year he was drafted, or this year he's being drafted as wide receiver 50. And last year he finished wide receiver 31. That's nearly 20 spots difference, which doesn't make any sense. So Darnell Mooney is certainly a sleeper. Christian Kirk is also a sleeper. I mentioned CJ Stroud. Kirk has the perfect opportunity to play the complementary role in Houston to Nico Collins. No Tank Dell this year. Kirk becomes the versatile inside-outside receiver that Tank Dell was for the Texans. I believe that he's getting underdrafted. I think Higgins is slightly being overdrafted. His role is most likely to be in the slot, where Stephon Diggs had that role last year, and he was playing really well until he got hurt. He was definitely a top 20 option at wide receiver last year. And Kirk excels in terms of vertical playmaking from the slot. At one point, at his peak in Jacksonville, he had 84 catches, 1,100 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He's also a good route runner and a very efficient slot receiver for that position. A lot of guys at slot don't have a high yards per catch, but Kirk does. And I think because so much attention will be gravitating towards Nico Collins, Kirk will really benefit. And I could see him having a very solid floor in PPR leagues. I could see him easily catching 80 passes this year. Demario Douglas, speaking of catching a lot of passes, I believe he will catch a lot in New England this year. So let's just think about Demario Douglas for a second and his career so far. As a rookie, where I think he was a 6th or 7th round pick, he had 49 catches for 561 yards on a really bad offense. In year 2, that went up to 66 catches from 49, 561 yards to 621. He also didn't score a touchdown as a rookie, and I think he scored 3 as a second-year pro. He was the leading receiver, wide receiver, for Drake May last year. This year, he goes to an offense built by Josh McDaniels that has featured players like Demario Douglas. Quick, shifty, good route runners, good separators, right? From the slot. And we're even hearing that Demario Douglas has been watching cut-ups of Julian Edelman, meaning that he could play more of the Z position this year and the slot position as opposed to just the slot, which means he's going to play a lot more snaps. So I think McDaniels is going to have Douglas on the field more than last year. That's huge. His quarterback, Drake May, will be playing the entire season, first of all, instead of coming in week 6. Second, he's going to be better. Third, the O-line is better. 4, right, they have other receivers that potentially can help Douglas out. And what we've heard at training camp is that he has been the best receiver consistently. He has been the guy for Drake May. And Drake May constantly describes him as a guy that you can't guard in a phone booth as his favorite target. I also mention this all the time, but Drake May's favorite target at North Carolina, a slot receiver named Josh Downs. Demario Douglas fits that role very well, and he's faster than you think, too. He's not just quick and shifty and good after the catch. He's actually pretty fast. Demario Douglas is a guy to really pick in PPR. Next, Alec Emanor? Emanor? I don't know how to say this guy's name, bro, but I've been impressed from what I've seen. And this is somebody that I actually didn't go deep enough in the weeds with my evaluation in college because I don't think he was drafted until the 4th or 5th round. And I didn't make my way all the way to that round. But I've been paying close attention, and actually, he is my highest owned wide receiver, or second highest owned wide receiver on Underdog. My second highest drafted percentage player, and I don't even really know how to say his name. If anyone can help me out, let me know. But what I've seen so far tracks really well. So he's been playing a lot with Cam Ward in the preseason. And when he's been on the field, he's been getting the ball. So 92% of the snaps that Cam Ward has played in the preseason, he's been on the field. He's run 88% of the routes while being on the field with Cam Ward, and he's also drawn 57% of the targets. 4 targets, 2 catches, 47 yards in one singular first quarter. He's big, he's fast, he ran a 4.4, and he's like 6'2". And from the clips on X that I've seen, at joint practices, he was routing up the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if you look deeper into his stuff, just search him up on X or search him up on the internet, his routes are really clean and crisp for a guy of that size and for a rookie. So I think he was just genuinely underdrafted, and he could be the number 2 receiver for the Titans. That's a guy I'm willing to go after, especially with Cam Ward, where who else is catching passes other than Calvin Ridley? Like, yeah, Tony Pollard will get some catches. Chigo Okonkwo is on the field, but he hasn't really been great, and I'm not a huge believer in him as a natural receiver. Tyler Lockett is washed. Van Jefferson isn't good. So it's a prime opportunity for a rookie to step in as the number 2 receiver, and he's been having a good camp and a good preseason. And he's built a good rapport with his rookie too, and they're going to be together for a while. So this is a prototypical fantasy sleeper. Love it. Dante Thornton from the Las Vegas Raiders is another choice to be a major sleeper here. He has great physical capabilities. Out of Tennessee, 6'5", 4.3 speed. Okay? He's been the starting X receiver, the perimeter target for the Raiders all summer. He's been playing starting snaps in the preseason, including catching a back shoulder touchdown from Geno Smith against the Cardinals. He was first in yak per reception at Tennessee last year in the entire nation. Third in yards per route run as well. And again, he showcased really good rapport with Geno Smith. And the Raiders need a guy with size and a guy with speed to stretch the defense so that Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, Ashton Genty can work them underneath areas. So Thornton is probably going to be more of a boom or bust option in fantasy this year. But I'm willing to take a chance on a productive college receiver who runs a 4.3, is 6'5", and is already starting with an aggressive downfield passer such as Geno Smith. So another good late round rookie. Pat Bryant is a guy I've aggressively been going after because all the signs are that he will be the number 2 receiver in Denver. A good offense that we expect to rise this year, a quarterback, a young guy that we expect to rise. He will be filling the slot role, the big slot role of the Denver Broncos. And I think he'll be a steal this year. Not just a sleeper, but a steal. I think he will be startable for much of the season. There was so many things about his game that reminded me of Michael Thomas. That comes from the mouth of his head coach, Sean Payton. Okay. Also, when talking about his receiver depth chart, Sean Payton went in this order: Courtland Sutton, Pat Bryant, and then he said Franklin. So Bryant was the number 2 name mentioned. This was extremely recently. This was like a day ago, yesterday. Also, the GM said Pat Bryant is ahead of schedule as a rookie. So everybody across the board who drafted him, who thought of him like Michael Thomas, who played the big slot role in New Orleans, they traded the big slot last year, Vele, away. What is there not to love here? He's a rookie. The coach loves him. The GM loves him. He's been good in the preseason. It's on a rising offense. He is an absolute sleeper to draft. Jalen Coker, same thing. A late in the process sleeper. Over the last 2 seasons, Adam Thielen, who just was traded, has averaged just over 7 targets per game from Bryce Young. Jalen Coker is now filling the slot role in Carolina. He's in line for 100-plus targets as the number 2 wide receiver alongside Ted McMillan, who I love as well, in another offense that could be on the rise, right? Bryce Young played really well last year. I like their offensive line. I like Dave Canales. I like Chuba Hubbard, right? Jalen Coker's the clear number 2 option in this offense. He's better than Leggett. He's straight up better than Leggett. Last year, he proved that, right? Among rookie receivers, he was second in the NFL. Among rookies, think of, Brian Thomas, right? Malik Neighbors, right? Ladd McConkey, Marvin Harrison Jr. Go down the list of guys that played at rookie receiver last year. Coker was second best in yards per route run versus man coverage last year. And he's very good in the middle of the field, which is where Bryce Young likes to go because he's small. And he often targets that middle of the field. He did at Alabama. He did at Carolina. That's what he's done with Thielen. So I think Coker is a guy that you could get in the last round of your draft that could be a wide receiver 3 for your fantasy team this year, specifically in PPR formats. I think he's an absolute steal. He's actually a guy, an example of a young receiver who's now getting opportunity, who is legitimately good, okay? Roman Wilson is the final target as a sleeper receiver. This one's a little bit more of a dart throw. Probably not going to go in a lot of your leagues in the draft, but he was a good player on a really good Michigan team that won the national championship. He was their best receiver, okay? And he was J.J. McCarthy's favorite target in the passing game out of the slot. He will now be the number 2 receiver, most likely, for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been battling with Calvin Austin in that role. Rodgers seems to like his upside. He had a strong preseason in the games and the showings that he had. And remember, this guy didn't even barely play, maybe at all, as a rookie. So this is really his rookie season. He was really strong at joint practices, according to multiple reports. And the Steelers have a history of drafting really good receivers. They drafted Roman Wilson in the 3rd round, which is not nothing, right? And they like his skill set to be able to work the middle of the field and complement a guy like DK Metcalf, who's a perimeter target. The Steelers need someone to step up, right? It's not going to be Robert Woods. And if it's not Calvin Austin, it has to be Roman Wilson. So that's why I included him on the list. At tight end, Jonnu Smith, also on the Steelers. I think he will be the 2nd most targeted player in the offense. But again, it's worth taking a shot on multiple of these guys in such an ambiguous situation led by Aaron Rodgers. Jonnu Smith had 88 catches for 886 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. That's a lot of 8s. This is a player that had 88 catches, 8 touchdowns at tight end that is going as the tight end 20 the year after he achieved that, which is absurd. It's bizarre. I've never seen that happen. The Steelers traded for Jonnu Smith. They went out of their way to trade for Jonnu Smith, okay? His competition is the unknown Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin, who's tiny, Pat Freiermuth, who's not as athletic or gifted or fast or explosive, and Jonnu Smith is one of Arthur Smith's favorite players. He's had 3 relevant fantasy seasons, specifically tight end 10 in 2020, which was his breakout season in Tennessee with Arthur Smith as the OC, okay? He broke out. He went to New England. In 2019, the year previous to that, he was a top 20 tight end at tight end 18. In 2023, under Arthur Smith, while splitting time with Kyle Pitts and not becoming a focal element of the offense until later, he was tight end 17. So after being one of the top 5 tight ends in fantasy last year, he's going as tight end 20. To me, it just doesn't make any sense, right? Even as a splitting time with Kyle Pitts in 2023, he had 50 catches. So he is going to get funneled targets and plays for him specifically. He is a yak demon. So Jonnu Smith is a good PPR option at the tight end position if you choose to wait, okay, or go with 2 in the draft. Dalton Kincaid, I think, is being underrated and slept on this year. He goes a little bit higher than Jonnu. He is tight end 13, I believe, currently. But Kincaid, that's not a tight end 1, by the way. That's a high-end tight end 2. But Dalton Kincaid is a first-round pick tight end who we were drafting at tight end 5 or 6 last year. Now he's tight end 13. He's tied to Josh Allen in an ambiguous situation where no one knows who's going to be second in catches or maybe even first in catches on the team. Kincaid had 75 targets in only 13 games last year, and he played through injury for much of the season. He was tight end 8 before his injury last season, which was much better than 13th and closer to where we thought he would land. He was also still efficient, tight end 10 in yards per route run and tight end 4 in yak per reception. He's a gifted player who's put on a little bit of size this offseason and could easily be the number 1 or number 2 target as the Bills hoped for when they picked him in the first frickin' round a couple years ago. The Bills clearly need someone to step up, and it's worth a dart on a Bills pass catcher this year. As I mentioned with Keon Coleman as well. And my final tight end and final sleeper in this video is Hunter Henry. With Drake May last year, Hunter Henry had a 19.2 target share, 50 yards per game, a 1.7 yards per route run, which anything above like 1.5 is pretty good, especially for a tight end. 22.7 first read share. And he also had 11.3 PPR points per game, which was tight end 8. He did play under Josh McDaniels before, the first season with Mac Jones. He had 9 touchdowns that year. So he is a red zone threat and could be the red zone threat of an ascending Patriots offense. He was Drake May's favorite target. I'm just going to be flat out honest with you guys. He was Drake May's favorite target last year. Every third down, every red zone trip, Drake May was looking for Hunter Henry. Anytime they needed a one-on-one matchup to win, it was Hunter Henry. So he's being drafted, around like tight end 18, 19 range, 17 range. He finished as tight end 8 last year with the same quarterback. He's played under this offense before. Like, he's going to be a steal. He might not finish as a top 10 tight end again, but he probably will finish above his ADP without a doubt. So if you want a sleeper at tight end, Hunter Henry's your guy. There it is, my sleepers for 2025. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like the video. Don't be a jabroni and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.